Welcome to Procurability's Procurement Pathways, a journey into the dynamic world of procurement told through the voices of its most trusted leaders. Here, every story, every lesson, and every hard-won insight reveals how personal passion fuels professional impact, and how those moments taken together shape the future of our field. Today's guest is Rosemarie Timko, Vice President of Global Procurement for Mars Science and Diagnostics. Hello, Rosemarie.
Hey, Stacy.
How you doing?
So far, so good.
Good.
No sense of complaining is
That's
kind
right.
of my motto.
That's right. Well, at least the weather's got to be beautiful there. I was thinking about you this morning and how you're in Hilton Head, right? It's
Yes.
supposed to be really beautiful there now.
It is. Well, although unusually warm, we're already in that 90-degree weather, and I could use a few more 70s and low 80s, but here we are.
I hear that. It went from zero to hero pretty quick. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Thank you for saying yes to this. It's been way too long since we chatted, and it was wonderful to reconnect with you in our first conversation for prep. So I really appreciate this, and I think people will learn a lot from it. Why don't we start by having you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure, perfect. And thank you for having me and asking me to do this. It'll be a good conversation and a lot of fun. Rosemarie Timko. I've been in the world of procurement for many decades. It's kind of sad, Stacy, when I think back of the career path and just how long it's all been. But an exciting journey. I'm currently with Mars in their Science and Diagnostics division. I've been with Mars for the past 11 years, always within their Petcare division, and it's been a really great ride, a wonderful company to work for. I love the fact that it's privately held and very much family owned, and the family's a big part of what we do and participates a lot in the business itself, which makes it great. But I started my procurement journey in kind of a by accident way, which I think if you're a Gen Xer back in the early 90s getting out of college, procurement was an unknown, and certainly supply chain, there was no major for it or anything. So I graduated with a math major and thought I'd make my world in more finance. And of course, procurement is just that. But started in the world of commodities and in New York, where I grew up, and did that for a number of years before I relocated to Pittsburgh. Met my future husband back in the day. He was a Pittsburgher, and we met in Manhattan, but decided to go back there and get married and live there for quite a bit, which I did for 21 years.
Wow!
And when I got there, stayed in commodities. I worked in an energy business. Natural gas was actually pretty big back in the day through that region in Pittsburgh. And started managing some accounts for them. And one of my customers at the time was Heinz, and a big Pittsburgh business and well known, of course. And really enjoyed working for them. I was buying gas for their factories, for their locations, and what they were doing in their business. But I wanted to try my hand at something fun and new. And back then it was this thing called reverse auctions, and going into the marketplace and having our suppliers bid for business. And it just sounded so new and exciting. And that was a company called Free Markets, which is where we met and eventually became Ariba, before I ended up leaving in 2005 back then. But a wonderful place to really learn about what it means to be in a procurement type of environment. And I was leading, at the time, I was what we called ourselves market makers in the world of indirects. And never heard of indirect before, but learned real quick what that was about and the areas of spend that were called indirects. And we managed buying for these Fortune 500 companies, and it was just pretty cool to be able to do that and then bring them into an online environment to have them bid for business. So that was super exciting. Heinz became my customer again when they were part of one of our business customers, clients at Free Markets. And eventually I went to go work for them. And I said, okay, enough's enough. I know your business inside and out. So I went over and worked for Heinz for 10 years. Went over there in
Wow.
2005. During that time, at the very end, was when they became sold themselves and became a private company under the private equity firm 3G. And, things changed, behaviors changed, and how I worked with my people and my supply base was very different than how I would have liked. And, you grow up in an environment where you run into the same suppliers over and over again, the same people that you work with over and over again. And reputation and integrity was super key. And I didn't like the direction of where the business was going. So I decided to make a switch and went over to a company called Big Heart Pet Brands that was bought by Smuckers while I was there. So a lot of big names in a kind of the CPG world. And that was my first entrance into the world of pet care. Big Heart Pet Brands was, a big domestic North America pet food company, and learned a lot about that market. And that led me to where I am today with Mars. I started at Mars working for Royal Canin, and now in the science and diagnostics division of the business. So an interesting journey. Amazing how small of a world it is, though. A lot of the same people, no matter which company I worked for. And it's been a lot of fun. And here I am.
It's stunning that all that time has passed, to your point. I still remember sitting in our little cube area, listening to you talk on the phone to your mom in Italian.
That's right. Yeah.
And I didn't speak Italian. I was trying to listen in and just see if I could get a word or two because it just sounded so awesome. And to your point about moving to Heinz from having served Heinz, that happened a lot because by the time we were done with it, we knew so much about the client that it was just, an easy hop to go from one to the other because you spend so much time working so closely with them. And I think a lot of us did that. But it's reminded me now, you've had not one, not two, but 3 acquisition situations in your career.
Yes. And I mean, it started, I didn't, bring up, but the trading company that I was with was bought and sold several times. We were part of Solomon Smith Barney, then, Citigroup, and then, with Fibro at the end. I feel like I've been lucky to have experienced those changes. And I think dealing with change is a super important characteristic to have and work on in your career. And you have to have just a positive attitude that it'll somehow work out. And if it doesn't, there's always the next opportunity. It's just right around the corner. And I think I really enjoyed the experience of it all, just having that change and seeing, what's next. And you really learn what you like and what you don't like. And you can see it in the way companies run themselves as to whether it's the right fit for you and if you want to stay there.
What are some of the things that would clue you in to whether it makes sense to stay or not? And I ask because there's a lot of this happening in the market right now, a lot of acquisition, a lot of companies becoming something else. And a lot of people who've been in a steady structure for a long time suddenly starting to see that their place in the world is now completely changed. Because you mentioned, and you mentioned in the Heinz situation that you started to notice it was becoming something that didn't feel right, and you knew the signs. What are some of those signs, both positive and negative?
Yeah, I think on the positive side, I'll start, there, because there are a lot of great things that come with change. You learn a lot about how companies operate and how it can be different, and that there is more than one way, to make things a success. And you have to have the ability to be open to that and appreciate, a different way of getting to the finish line that delivers the same success, if not more, if not better. And I think when you have those kinds of change and your leadership changes and they bring in a new way of thinking about it or, new structure to how you operate and do business, it's an opportunity for you to, listen, to take it and, steal with pride and bring it into your own way of working and, better yourself and better your team and make them stronger. So that's a huge plus when you're, especially if you've been somewhere for a very long time, you get into a rut. Sometimes you just think that's the way things are. And, you need to freshen up often and kind of get with what's going on, with the game. But I'd say on the negative side, and, what I've seen is, there's some type of leadership that I just don't want to work for. And, for the most part, when I've left the job, it's been because of that. They say your line manager really determines whether you stay or go. And there is truth to that. And it's as well as your overall leadership. If you've got leaders that, what I experienced at Heinz, we were a public company, but very much family. Heinz, the reputation that they have, you just felt like it was a small group of friends that are, running a business and working together, which is what Mars is like as well. And you could make a difference. Like you could impact that way of working in that structure. And I think, the change came when the change came in, it was about the bottom line only. And, the way that, you treat your suppliers, your partners that are there for you when things are not going well. If you change that and make it all about, the numbers, the payment structure that you have, the discounts that you're getting and bidding them out every year because, you basically want to see and maybe make a move, every year with a new vendor. You lose the ability to really build that strength of that relationship, to have that vendor really appreciate what you're making at the end of the day, what you're selling to, we want our suppliers to go into a store, see the brand that they're helping to build and pick it off the shelf and say, yeah, I'm buying that because I know what's in it. I know what they're about and I love them. And when you start to not treat that partner that way, you get exactly that back. And, I started to see that, and that's not the reputation I wanted in this industry. As I mentioned, you come across the same people, they switch jobs too, and you end up working, once again with those people in another role. And, you want them to be there for you just as much as you'll be there for them. And, that was, a direction that I didn't see coming, when the takeover happened back then. And I stayed, for several years, under the new leadership before I finally said, I just can't do it anymore. I wasn't having fun, and you have to go to work and want to be at work. You're there more than you're home. And if you've got that kind of a feeling, then it's just not worth it. And you make the change.
Exactly. I have 2 follow-up questions from that. On this podcast, we've talked a lot about people first leadership. And our last podcast with Howard Richmond, that was a big topic for us, how it's all about, people aren't your most important asset. They're your only asset. And when you were talking about Heinz as a family, enjoying going to work, having this little kind of work community, that says so much about the morale of who you're working with. But what we haven't talked about in the podcast is the external relationships. And I think that's such a wonderful and important point, that our suppliers are our partners. They're not our vendors.
That's right.
They are working just as hard as we are to make success happen. They know so much about our organization. And also, absolutely, yes, our personal credibility comes into play when we're representing a company that doesn't treat our supplier partners well. And that becomes a big part of that decision. I imagine that was a big part of the decision for you when you weren't able to treat those partners the way that you felt they should be treated.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, the feeling is the same with your, the team working for you, right? You want to leave them in a place where, they're growing and, that they're building those relationships as well. And if you don't see it from your leadership, then, that's the message you send down the line. And, that's not the environment that I want to be in, that I will be in. And, I hire associates today that worked for me in the past, and I call them up and I stay in touch. And if I could help them get a role somewhere else, I certainly will. And I think that's the community that you have to have in supply chain in general. I think, you have it. You see it across sales, of course, but I think, in our industry, we have a lot of confidentiality in what we do. we see a lot of things in our businesses, and you have to build that kind of skill set amongst your team and help each other out as well.
Exactly. It's all about the community. And we've talked a lot about that, the importance of community, especially today when so many of us are remote, having each other's back and having those conversations and keeping in touch in that way.
For sure.
That's huge. That's huge. Curiosity question. How long did it take you after that leadership change at Heinz to have that awareness that, wait a moment, I've just got to go?
I think it was 2 years. The first year it was a lot of change, closing locations, letting people go. There was a lot of that going on. So those are the terrible times. And you're like, okay, they've got a vision, we'll work and we'll restructure, we'll make it happen. But then when things settle down and you start to see, what the longer term strategy is, and, that's not where I wanted to be long term. At that point, it was a definite for me that, I wasn't going to stay.
You kind of feel it in your gut.
You never want to work someplace where sometimes you feel like you just want to go home and take a shower because, it was that dirty of a day. And you had moments like that, where you're just like, ugh, I'm not doing this anymore. And, that's pretty much how it was at the end, and no disrespect to, I have a lot of friends still there, and no disrespect to those that, work it out and get through it. I mean, they find a way, and not everybody was in a position maybe that I was in and what I could see and how I was working. But, and it's listen, the brands are still awesome. I buy nothing but Heinz ketchup, no doubt. But, but that's not where I want to go to work every day. So, you make those changes.
That's it. And there's such an emotion attached to that. And think about the change that they've had since. So when you left, it was owned by a third party, right?
Yeah. So I left before the Kraft Heinz marriage happened.
Yeah.
So, that was another, major, there's always, major acquisitions. Mars, we just had our acquisition with Kellanova was an amazing one for us. But you're building like two giant worlds now and bringing them together. And that was the Kraft Heinz was the same way. Smucker's acquiring Big Heart, not as dramatic. We were you would think we were kind of the small one, but we made up a third of their future business. So it's like you look at these acquisitions and how they change a company as well. And, that was that acquisition, Kraft and Heinz, although I wasn't part of it then, I still lived in Pittsburgh when it happened. And the turmoil of what it did even to the city of Pittsburgh, right? you were there, I'm sure felt it, or, from the free market states, it's like, what's going to happen to our city? This is Heinz. But
I'm a Pittsburgh native.
Yes. And
Heinz is just so, woven into the infrastructure of the city. It's almost like Iron City beer, the same thing.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So, those are big life-changing moments, and, things aren't going to be the same. It's just how, what does it mean to you in your day to day? How are you going to react to it? And does it sit well with you? It goes back to the integrity and the way of doing business. Is that how you want to live your life? And is that how you want to operate? And if the answer is no, then you're free to make the change. So make the change.
Exactly. And sometimes you have to turn off your brain and turn on your gut. Because even if your brain is saying, okay, maybe there's more stock coming, the bonus will be big, whatever it is, if it's not feeding you, I hate to get all woo-woo about it, but if it's not kind of feeding your soul as a professional, then it doesn't work.
Right.
And you can try to affect change to some degree to get it back to where it should be. But if it falls on deaf ears, if the leadership isn't listening, then that's a decision that you have to make.
Right.
On the flip side of that, we talked about the partnership piece with external parties. We've talked about the personal piece in navigating change. What about as a leader? Because I think you've been a people leader for many years. And I think you'd be such an awesome people leader. What have you learned, and what have you done in all of these different acquisitions and company changes that have spelled success for your teams in terms of keeping them whole?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that I like to lead is with a very open conversation, open book policy, and anyone who's worked for me or with me will know that you're going to know what I'm thinking, and you're going to hear me say what's on my mind at all times, and I expect the same back. And I think my team has always appreciated that I'm not going to sugarcoat things, but I'm also not going to linger around and have that affect me or the way I work with you going forward. It's like, to me, you are family. It's like how I would talk to my brother is how I'm going to talk to you.
Absolutely.
And some days it's going to be rude, and some days it's going to be like you're not even going to know who I am because it's so sweet, but it's going to be that kind of a conversation. And, if I know something, I share it. Obviously, there's things that you have to keep in confidence based on, what level in the organization it's coming from. But, to me, it's being open and honest with the team so that they know what's happening, giving them responsibility. I am not a micromanager whatsoever. But I have expectations from my team too, that they're doing what they're supposed to, and I don't have to watch you. So if that's not happening, then, you're going to hear from me on that one too. And, I've had the pleasure of bringing people into other job. When I've moved, I've certainly gone and hired some folks from my old job and brought them over, and, had some ability to help them through their careers. And I think that when they leave, they stay in touch. And I really like that too. I love to see, interns that worked for me, at Heinz that are now COOs of companies. And, I could be working for them and have no problem with it because I know they're good people. I know how they operate. They're quality folks. And that's how I've always kind of leaded. And I like that. I love to see people develop when they're on my team into new and future roles, and stay, working alongside me, in companies as well. So within Mars, I've had the pleasure of leading different teams in different segments of our business, and you stay in touch, and hopefully, you get to work with them again in a very different capacity, and that's happened. Yeah, so I really do like that.
So I want to go back to one thing that you just mentioned that was kind of, for me, a leadership mic drop. And that was around the fact that you are delighted to see people that used to work for you moving into leadership roles, and you would be happy to be able to work for them.
Right.
That is one simple statement, but it says so much about ego-free leadership that when you get to where we are, we've been working since, we met in 2001 or whatever it was. When you get to a certain point in your career, it's not about your escalation, right? If you're a leader, it's about empowering the next generation of leaders and celebrating the next generation of leaders. And I just want to take a minute to applaud that statement, because not a lot of leaders think that way.
Yeah, that's sad that they don't, because you do get to a point in your career where, of course you want to make money. That's why you work. But you're also, I make good money. That's great. But I don't need to be president, right? I don't need the ego of being like this title on my name that says, everybody works for me. I want to go to work and I want to love what I do. I want to add value, and I want to do it with good people that, I could also, when I'm not busy, have a cup of coffee with and want to actually hang out a little bit and chit chat and just see what's going on. And I think if you get to that point where you just aren't that way and you're just kind of an elitist in what you do day in and day out, then that's in my mind, a pretty lonely existence, right? I don't want to go into an office and shut the door. I want to sit in the middle of the room with, no walls, and, have the conversation across my cube to another one or in a circle, and, hear what people are talking about and see how I can help. And I hope somebody does that for me too, if they hear, because I talk to myself all the time, Stacy. So I'm sure everybody knows what I'm working on when I'm in an office. And hey, if they have something to say that could help me, please do. Because, somebody's got to answer me besides myself. So help me out. But that's the atmosphere that, that I want. And I know that the people that have worked for me that, are in these roles that are promotable, they're people I'd want to do that with. So why not? They know me and I know them, and that's the best environment to work in.
Right. And that's success, right? Seeing that happen makes you understand that what you've done has helped somebody else, has brought education. You've helped them navigate all the change that you're talking about and made them a better professional in a whole lot of ways.
Yeah. And you see the same, in how they lead their teams. You see it being passed on. And, that's great. That's maturity. You kind of see how it all passes down to that next generation of workers and how they're operating. And hopefully they do the same.
100%. 100%. I have one remaining question on each one of these acquisitions. And so we talked about the Free Markets to Ariba/Accenture acquisition. So that was first. And then we had the Heinz to third party acquisition prior to the Kraft Heinz merger. And then we had the Big Heart to Smucker's acquisition. For each one of those, what was the biggest learning in procurement, leadership, partnership in any way? What was the biggest professional learning you took away? Either because it was excellent behavior, it was not the best behavior, whatever it is. What was the best learning that you took away from each one of those?
I think it's, I'd say it's a good question. I think every situation's a little bit different as to, what is that acquisition trying to deliver at the end of the day. But I think it's getting your team to feel safe during those periods of time. There's so many meetings happening around you, so many people walking through the hallways and, coming and going. And there's change that's definitely coming, whether it be from an HR point of view, places closing, relocations, to how are we going to work with certain vendors? Are things going to change? Does somebody else now have to approve everything I do? So I think all of that is inevitable during those periods of time. But how do you make those around you feel safe? That, they're in a place where they're going to still be there the next day, as far as or that, you've got their back if they're not, to help them through it, to bring them somewhere else, or, look for that next job, whatever it might be during those changes. But there's just this turmoil that goes on during all of that change, and, how you control it and make it seem as normal as it possibly can. That's where I think as a leader you need to focus, because it's just so. I mean, it could be all that people think about, and it could just ruin them in their current, like give the wrong impression, or just not make them feel like they're part of the change, that they're just letting it happen.
And like you said before, sometimes if you're a leader, you're privy to information that the rest of the organization doesn't have. So there's a certain unknowingness, like when we were, manager level people at Free Markets, there was certain information that we weren't privy to, not knowing what was going to happen. So just kind of almost as a counselor.
Yeah. I mean,
being there for the teams.
That's what you need to be in those moments, is, a support system of sorts, right? Because you just, there's a lot you don't know. And I think it's okay. You just have to learn how to deal with it.
Right. That's beautiful. I have one more question for you today, and that one is around guidance. So what would be your key piece of advice, one key piece of advice from your own procurement pathway that would help others along theirs?
I think to me, it's curiosity. And you need to be curious in what you do. If you're going into a role or going into a new business or, being asked to do something new, and you just assume that what you're being told is the way, or, it is a job description and that's all that you're going to go by, then you're not going to really, live your best life at the office, right? It's just not going to work. I think you need to be curious and understand the why behind everything that's being asked of you, and then put your 2 cents into it. You make it yours and influence things that are happening around you. So that, you've got a say, and it feels more like it's your part. It's your part of it. Like it's you that's helping to make things better and influence that change. So to me, and I look for that in the people that I hire. I don't need yes people, and I don't need those around me that just think that there's only one way to make it happen. I want you to kind of question things, understand what it is that you're doing, really dig into it a bit and get curious about what it is that you're doing every day. It's not just a process. It's not just pen to paper. You have to really think about things and, put your mind at work.
Absolutely. And challenge too. I love it when people challenge me.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure. And I think you can just live life by the book, or you can write the book. I like to write a book.
Well, that's the way to end this episode right there. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us today, Rosemarie?
No, I think this is fun. Yeah, this has been great. And it's always great to connect. And it's relationships like this, Stacy, that you're right. It's been over 25 years or so, but, pick up right where you left off. And, I think good people always end up, in great places in life as you have. And I really appreciate you asking me to do this for you.
Right back at you, Rosemarie. And to evidence what you were saying, I feel like we just picked up a conversation that we dropped when I left 25 years ago. And real people, good conversation, and go Steelers.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very much.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
For more than 30 years, Procurability has been the leading provider of procurement and supply chain services, delivering best-in-class advisory, managed services, digital, and talent solutions across industries. Global organizations trust us to transform their procurement operations, drive growth, and reimagine what's possible. To receive our latest thought leadership, subscribe to Procurability's Insights at procurability.com/insights.